Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, the organizers, for the excellent arrangements. I will start with a small anecdote. In 2005, November, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa became the President of Sri Lanka. In 2005, December, I wrote, "This man is going to finish off the LTTE in 3 years and on his terms." Then I was asked, with the support of the international community or not. I said, with the support of the international community, 3 years, without that, 5 years. And there was international community support for the Sri Lankan government's efforts at that time, and the war ended in 3 years. The question again is, even I have used the term war, even the nomenclature, I think the Sri Lankans, the government has to be clear about. Are we talking about a conflict as in post-conflict here, or a war, or a humanitarian operation, or insurgency? See, various combination of phrases are being used in this country. That itself is a confusing affair for the international community, particularly, I would think, those who are not following this on a regular and a daily basis. Sri Lanka celebrated the Victory Day, fine. It was a victory, yes. Victory over terrorism, yes. But if it was a humanitarian operation, as we were told at that time, it should have been success of the humanitarian operation, not victory. There is a lot of terminological, etymological problems that went with that in the acceptance of issues of accountability that has come to haunt the nation today. As Secretary of Defense mentioned yesterday, citing an extensive study, nearly 7,900 or close to 8,000 people may have died. Many of them may have been LTTE cadres. Because at one point in time, the world accepted, acknowledged, or claimed that there were anything up to 30,000 LTTE cadres. After 300,000 civilians were out, there was quite a possibility of civilians in the form of LTTE cadres. And Prabhakaran, almost from day one of his operations, was taking families of their martyrs, or heroes as they would call, as saying they are like my parents, like my sister, like my brother. He would take them around. And he took them around almost every day to everywhere he went, till his last day. That is to say, Sri Lanka started talking about human shield only after Kilinochchi. The army went to Kilinochchi and discovered in early 2009 that Kilinochchi has been evacuated totally. Of course, they did it once earlier in Jaffna. Jaffna, at least everyone knew. Until then, Prabhakaran's story was sold and accepted to some extent by a lot of people. But Kilinochchi town became a ghost town. It became very clear Prabhakaran was using them all as human shields. And getting them out of LTT's clutches or hands or whatever, that it became a major humanitarian operation to that extent. Yes, it was a success. They were brought out through a variety of coerced methods. And there were 7,000, 5,000 brought out people. I think that figure has to be sorted out. One. Two, yes, this morning, External Affairs Minister said that not due enough acknowledgement is being given to the developments that the army has put in, the government has put in, the first people have put in the north and the east. I was in the north in May for about a week. It is really astounding that something good work has been done. It is sad that it has not been acknowledged. I won't say it has not been acknowledged totally, not adequately, and the way an average Sri Lankan or a Sringala or a Sri Lankan government official or an armed force personnel will be able to accept and appreciate it. I think that Sri Lanka deserves. Yes, there are issues. I think Sri Lankan government has to necessarily address them. For instance, everyone here talked about war, victory, reconstruction, the 5 wars, etc. They are all happening, and in fact, as someone who has been a student and a friend of Sri Lanka who has been visiting this country almost every 3-4 months, spending 10-15 days traveling across and meeting with leaders, people and policymakers, I can say with certain confidence that many of these issues, reconstruction, all these things were being thought of even as the war came to a close. Particularly after the victory in the East, for which General Nayagesh should be taking the credit. I think when they caught possibly with some 30 to 40,000 Tamil civilians who were let loose by the LTTE for the North, the government did a wonderful operation of creating accommodation when the refugees came from the North. That was sad to say. That was not acknowledged as such. It was immediately said they are creating garrison, they are creating ghettos, and when those people, 300,000 people were brought in, even in Colombo it was being described as refugee tourism. It is sad. But when people look at these things with that kind of mentality, I doubt much will come of it. But having said that, these roads that are being built, industries that are slowly coming up, I won't say it is as fast as it should be in the north or elsewhere in the country, as some speakers yesterday pointed out. There are only 2 districts in this country who are, Arun pointed out, 2 districts in this country that are economically developed, Colombo and Galle. So it will take time for these things, and particularly Jaffna Heights may say that we were an industrialist city or whatever. That was before the war, 35 years back. It will take time to come. But there is one aspect that Sri Lanka cannot forget, the Sri Lankan government has to take it up. That's the political reconciliation. Let us accept war, LTT was there, war was there, or humanitarian operation was there, and a solution was found to that aspect. Basically, it is a political issue. A solution has to be a political solution. There is no going away from that. Yes, if in the last 4 years things have come to such a pass, in the first week of the war victory, from May, I think around May 25 or so, I was here for 15 days. Every government official, leader or a policy maker I met, they were saying LTT cannot come back, militancy cannot come back. That has continued until 6 months ago. Today, openly, we are talking about the possibility of new terrorism coming back, possibility of LTT revival. I think the government should, at least now, look into the prospects of finding a political solution within a united Sri Lanka. That is also a must. I think definitely a progress has been made by the ordering of the elections in the northern province finally on September 21. There will be elected government. I am not going to go into who is coming there or who is not coming there, winning there or not. That is for the people of the north to decide. But that forum at least should be the provincial council. That was the center of the problem as far as the political issues were concerned. There can be police power, there can be land power. These are sensitive issues as far as the Tamil people are concerned. What kind of a solution we arrive at is for the Sri Lankans to decide. But we cannot run away from the reality that there is a solution that needs to be found. Yes, unfortunately, events of the past months, including, unfortunately, the northern provincial elections, have kicked up issues. For instance, I am referring to the TNA manifesto yesterday. If they were confident of winning the election, they needn't have said what they had said. They have to work with the central government. They have to work with the rest of Sri Lankan people. They have to work with the Sri Lankan state as an institution. And administratively inexperienced as they are, they will require a lot of help, support, sympathy, and education from the rest of the country if they have to make a grade. For nearly 30 years, no Tamil from that group has been a minister in any kind of a political administrator, and running a government, they would suddenly discover it's not a joke. That has got its own imperatives, problems for both the people and the leadership of the Tamils if they were to come to power, or even if they were to sit in the opposition. That is going to have its own imperatives for them to begin with. But again, the Sri Lankan state has a responsibility towards that, educating them, encouraging them, holding their hands and taking them. That kind of a thing that the army and the government have done on the reconciliation and rehabilitation, etc., I think they should also extend it to reconciliation. I mean political reconciliation. Here in this country, reconciliation has two different meanings. One for the government, which is rehabilitation has two meanings, and reconciliation has two meanings of ex-LTT cadres being mainstreamed. That is one thing, but that is not how it is being understood by the Tamils, particularly political parties like the TNA. So those things have to be addressed. Now to the larger issue of the regional thing. One, I would see this one as a domestic issue about which I flagged a point or two, then the sub-region, then the region, and at the global context. Sri Lanka, as all of us have learned and heard and read, and as we know otherwise, has been a hub of future development in the ocean. It was always like that. From time to time it has changed. Taken a new character, new identity, a brand image, I would say. Now today, because of the post-Cold War situation, it has got a different relevance, but it was always relevant to global trade from the Arab days. That is, I'm talking about the 5th and 6th centuries, or even later, and even in the contemporary world, as someone pointed out in the morning, what Winston Churchill said. Both for strategic reason and economic reason, Sri Lanka is what Sri Lanka is. We cannot distance ourselves from that reality. Again, as an island nation with a maritime interest, maritime security concerns, exposed greater by the LTTE and the Sea Tigers in particular, Sri Lanka also has its own concerns. As an Indian, and speaking from an Indian's perspective, not an Indian government perspective or anything like that, I can say this much, that whatever is Sri Lanka's concern in the Indian Ocean is also India's concern, and vice versa. Whether it is trade, whether it is security. For India, Sri Lanka is the first line of defense. If you take Sri Lanka as a large aircraft carrier in the middle of the sea, it can also become a threat. It is how India views Sri Lanka and how Sri Lanka views itself. And in the sub-territorial, sub-regional context, one is India, not any speaker mentioned it, on July 8, if I am not mistaken, this year, India, Sri Lanka and Maldives signed a trilateral maritime security cooperation agreement. I think this is the beginning of a very, very good and prosperous trilateral arrangement that we could have imagined for this region. This would not have happened 5 years back because of the LTTE's presence and other issues. But this has begun well here, and there are other dimensions and the next stages one after the other that can go. Interestingly, what we should note here is, after signing a trilateral agreement, it was published. The outcome agreement of the talks of July 8th was published officially, so that no nation in the region or elsewhere, that is how I see it, had to have any confusion or doubts or fears about whether it is for or against or things like that. It confines itself right now to piracy, ecology, etc., what are basically non-offensive nature. This is at the another issue at the sub-regional level will be talked about. Many people, speakers also mentioned about the kind of support that, of course, if I don't talk now, someone is going to ask a question anyway. So, about the role of Tamil Nadu, etc. You should remember one thing, in 2009, the day the war was at the peak and elections were being held for the Indian Parliament, Tamil Nadu voted out all so-called pan-Tamil pro-LTTE elements. And there was also a reference to Tamil Nadu being the hub of Tamil separatism. Yes, but Tamil separatism came to Sri Lanka 15 years after the mainstreaming of separatist politics. There was no militancy in Tamil Nadu at any point in time. The Dravidian parties came to power in 62. They won a substantial number of seats. And 67, they came to power. By 62 itself, they decided they have to take the middle course if they have to come to power. And yes, they have not, there are the two major Dravidian parties have not been out of government. Either of the other has been in power in Tamil Nadu, and they cannot do without power, and they cannot win it without elections. There cannot be any militancy there. They are very clear about it. Unfortunately, they are using the Sri Lankan ethnic issue for their own reasons, shortcomings. It's unfortunate. But let us also accept one thing. A similar trend is prevalent even in this country. There are political parties, or extreme right and extreme left. They would like to take a punch at India for everything that is going wrong. If it doesn't rain in Sri Lanka one day, they may even say that. So this is unfortunate, realistic politics of these two countries, much as we are neighbors. One, I would also say, one reason is, no political leader in these two countries, Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, have exchanged notes. Any Sri Lankan politician who comes to Chennai, takes a car and goes to Tirupati, goes to T Nagar, do some saree shopping, comes back. They don't have any friends there. I know of senior political leaders camping in Chennai for 5 days, 6 days, and they would have met only me. And if Mr. N. Ram, the editor of The Hindu, were there, they would have met him. That's all. And Tamil Nadu politicians don't even know where Sri Lanka is in the world map. This is unfortunate. I have seen JVP leaders in Chennai airport. They say, no, we came from Delhi. We couldn't have met their, the same political party leaders. They would have met Indian communist leaders in Delhi. We couldn't have met communist party leaders in Chennai. This is unfortunate thing. So, without knowing each other, these parties are taking positions. Today, again, for instance, if you take, someone said Tamil Nadu is funding, ideological, no. Tamil Nadu gets its ideas not even from TNA, other than one senior TNA leader whom I know has a vague association with some Tamil Nadu politicians, peripheral politician, not any mainline politician of the Dravidian parties have ever met a TNA leader or any separatist, as far as I know. And I am keeping a fairly close idea of that. In fact, when Father Emmanuel wanted to come to Chennai surreptitiously last year, he was not even allowed by the Indian intelligence to land in the Chennai airport. He was put back in the same flight and sent back. And last week, again, let us distinguish between politics of Tamil Nadu and the policing work of Tamil Nadu. Last week, 2 LTT cadres were arrested, possibly from a tip of here, I don't know from where, because I left earlier. 2 people were arrested as LTT cadres by the same government which takes a political issue or an ethnic issue or a fishing issue or whatever. Likewise, 2 months back, an LTT racket was busted. These things keep happening, so let us not overtly be concerned about Tamil Nadu, and let us not shift our responsibility or blame from Sri Lanka to Tamil Nadu or elsewhere. Yes, diaspora is there, diaspora Inc. is there, diaspora political parties are there, diaspora has an influence which is being exploited, mutually exploited by political parties elsewhere across the world, just as they are being done in Tamil Nadu also. But Tamil Nadu, Sri Lanka will not be an election issue. 2, this maritime issue I was mentioning about this thing. We have got our own concerns about fishing issue, etc. I don't want to bore our non-Sri Lankan, non-Indian audience with the details of it. Once we sort it out, look, what is the opportunities for us as a regional hub? In the morning, Minister Amunagama mentioned that 30% of India's shipping trade goes from Colombo port, yes, particularly for South India and Tamil Nadu even more particular. But 70% of the trade in Colombo port is also for India. So there is going to be a mutually beneficial or a mutually destructive course we have to adopt. Imagine the kind of economic ease that we have, and if both of us can together, as I mentioned earlier, Sri Lanka is the first line of defense or offense for India, for instance. So will be Maldives. Trade-wise also, this is a relationship. There are issues, yes. Unfortunately, my state, people are stupid enough not to allow singular pilgrims, for many of them old pilgrims, this might have been their last chance to go to Bodh Gaya. This is condemnable, no questions asked. But that should not be used as something different. It is a passing phase in each one's history. I know in 83 when Indians, a cousin of mine was a bank officer, there were 50, 60 people were here, their passports were burnt, some of them had to run to the Indian High Commission for to save their lives. Many of them landed there without even their baggage which they had left in the hotel. These are our passing phases in any country's history, bilateral relations, which is unfortunate, but that's a reality. We should know, we should be matured enough to overlook these things, get over these things and pass on to the next phase, at which definitely as a Sri Lankan government and other institutions, particularly the armed forces, their personnel are brought there and sent back there. They have accepted it with dignity. So if these two countries of ours decide to work together on a variety of areas, there is a lot of scope for betterment for both. Of course, because Minister Amnagama mentioned all the details, I don't want to go back into all those things. Then the question, what do we mean by region? Are we talking about this sub-region or region as Asia or what more? I think Sri Lanka has to be very clear about what we are talking about in region. It cannot shift once again, as in the case of a political solution, from one issue to another. If it is region, are we talking about the South Asian region? In which case, or that immediate sub-region as I mentioned? Or are we talking about the whole of Asia? Even before Prime Minister Rajapaksa became president, during his election campaign in 2005, I remember he saying that we want a solution, we don't want Norway, we don't want the West here to solve our problems, we need an Asian solution. We will involve India, Sri Lanka, China and Pakistan. I do not know, yes, there was a solution for the war. India was involved, China and Pakistan supplied arms. That's all fine. But after that, what's the specific role? Even yesterday, Secretary of Defense was mentioning that India and China, power politics, etc. I would rather say it is not power politics. Basically, we have got issues with China. We have got, of course, my good friends from Pakistan and China here. These have to be sorted out in time. Just as we have got occasional irritants between India and Sri Lanka, these are all bilateral relations. But where do we begin or where do we end? That Sri Lanka has to decide. How do we go about it? And development, of course, Hambantota, to be fair to Sri Lanka, was offered to India not once but twice. Colombo Port was also, India made a decision we don't want. But do we stop there? As I mentioned again about maritime issues, for instance, there is the issue maritime cooperation is there. At the same time, there is also the maritime security cooperation is there. Then also the fishing issue is there. If the two of our countries work together, we can go into deep sea fishing in a big way. We necessarily don't have to bring in outsiders. One. Two, the next thing is about the overall global context. What exactly are we looking at? Rather, what is Sri Lanka looking at? It is basically a play of two extraterritorial powers, China and US. Rather, US is already here. China is an emerging superpower now. It cannot be denied. Whoever wants to say what. So what exactly? Are you going to make Sri Lanka a Cold War? Because Sri Lanka is where it is. Sri Lanka's place as a hub or a strategic locale cannot be denied. So what exactly Sri Lanka is going to do with this position? I think that decision Sri Lanka and Sri Lankans have to take early on. It is one thing for you to get cooperation from everyone to do something. It is one thing to leave give the impression that you are playing one against the other. I am not saying Sri Lanka is playing one against the other. I know for many of your leaders and the policy planners have explained. But I don't think that message gets across or is convincing enough for the world to believe. This is an unfortunate thing because many of these plans were there, as I said, even before President Rajapaksa came to power. Or they have continued this reconstruction or anything or involving Chinese funding. Because as a senior leader once told me, even US doesn't have funds. China is the only country that has funds. So I don't think anyone in the world is begrudging Sri Lanka for that. But will it stop there? Or what is US intention in this part of the world? After Afghanistan, or why should they be here? So is it in the interest of the sub-region or region as South Asia for trying to revive the call that we need Indian Ocean as a zone of peace? Yes, no one is going to listen to us, but there is no harm in all of us seeking that even as we work together or closely together to try and build a regional identity, regional strategic, economic and political cooperation. SAARC is there as a political entity, but it is not effective for a variety of reasons. In fact, I remember in 2005 or 6, immediately after he became president, Mahinda Rajapaksa also suggested that SAARC should have a common currency. Then, of course, there are issues within SAARC nations. Let us accept that. European Union was also going through problems. Euros also went by, with problems. And I remember President Rajapaksa mentioning a SAARC currency once later. I don't think there was enough enthusiasm in the SAARC nations for that. But somewhere along the line, as Minister Amanagama rightly pointed out, we have to work together. We have to live together, in which case let us learn to work together and cooperate in stage by stage and reach a goal, which is what is lacking inside Sri Lanka. On the ethnic issue, just before I close, I don't think the Tamils know what their goals are, where the goalpost is. I'm talking about the Tamils and Tamil political leaders in Sri Lanka, not the diaspora. The Sri Lankan government has goals, but I don't think it has convinced anyone that it is moving towards that goal. So once you have one set of proposals coming up, then that is being shot down, then there's a new forum created. So this doesn't, see, Tamils have a new 2-3 generations of Tamils have been fed with the feeling, or they have grown up with the feeling and conviction, I won't even say feeling, conviction, that whoever comes to power in Colombo is there to cheat us. I don't know what singular political leaders are going to gain by cheating a set of population, but that is unfortunately the conviction that many of these people have embedded into the minds and brains and body of every Tamil. That is how the diaspora spreads. So how to handle those situations? The Sri Lankan state and the Sri Lankan army, because you have contributed, you are part of this thing. In brutal terms, the Sri Lankan army may also be, sir, the single largest constituency of voters cutting across the country. So you have a stake in all these things, not just in winning the war and in this thing, ensuring peace. Thank you.